What's up, guys? I'm alive. And I said I was going to stream that Eagles 49ers game. I was really excited to do it. I might still do like a stream of it because those are two teams that I want to scout. So I have fibromyalgia, and with fibromyalgia comes chronic fatigue syndrome or chronic exhaustion. And I get like migraines and stuff. And basically I spent this weekend like unconscious, and when I was conscious, in pain. So sometimes this happens, and I need to have rest, and I need to take care of myself. And luckily for the Seahawks, they played on Thursday after they had just played another Thursday, and they finally get that extended break. And I don't know about you, but I needed that extended break too. So I had that weekend where I was just unconscious. And I'm sure there were a lot of players like on the defensive line and on the offensive line that were just fucking unconscious, right? It's been crunch time for them, both mentally and physically, and probably emotionally too, because it's been the trial of the playoffs, basically. We've had the Rams game followed by the 49ers game followed by this Dallas game, and they've been heartbreakers because of one, wow, we lost to our rivals when we were leading like the whole game, and then wow, our rivals just kicked the shit out of us, and then wow, we just lost to this Dallas game, which we really shouldn't have been that close, but did the refs screw us? Did they not screw us? It's hard to tell because we played so poorly too, but we also played so well. It's just one of those games. So everyone, I think, needs a chance to relax and to just breathe and maybe just take a nap, right? Just take a nap. And even now, I'm still not feeling too good. So I'm gonna try to do a full thing, but it's Tell the Truth Monday. And before we really get into it, thank you for watching First Kick Seahawks. I'd really appreciate it if you liked and subscribed. It would really help out the channel, especially when I do live streams. At any rate, Tell the Truth Monday. Seahawks are back to work today. Mostly it's an assessment day, right? They come in, they acknowledge truths. And for some Seahawk fans, it's the bitching day, right? It's the day where we talk about how much we suck. But that's not necessarily a truth. It's also, for some teams, the I'm going to say the masturbation day. For the 49ers, today is the day of masturbation, where they just beat the hell out of the Eagles after they just beat the hell out of us. And then they're probably like, yeah, we're going to beat the hell out of the Seahawks again, and we're just going to go all the way to the Super Bowl. And if anyone has been watching my channel or watching my Twitter, you already know I think that the 49ers are going to win the Super Bowl. And I think that they're going to do it against the Ravens. It should be the Ravens. If it's not the Ravens, I'm going to be surprised. I just think their defense combined with their offense this year, it's too much for most teams. Anyways. So what are some truths, right? Today is about balancing yourself. Because players get Tuesday off. Tuesday is the coach's day, where we deal with the truths that we've assessed. The players are going to go home and rest, and they're going to think about what these truths are. And then on Wednesday, we're going to get together with a new game plan that the coaches have established. And we're going to go in and we're going to compete on Turnover Thursday. We're going to bring it all together again on Friday, make sure that we're humming. On Saturday, we're doing a walkthrough. And then on Sunday or Monday, whichever game day it is, we're going to go compete our asses off. Win or lose, we're going to compete our asses off. Because ultimately, that's what matters. And hopefully, you win. But you can't You can't even attempt to win if you don't know how to compete. And so you could say, well, we just got our asses slacked by the 49ers on Thanksgiving football. And now we're going up against Dallas, who has like this really superb pass defense, along with Armstead, Parsons, and Lawrence. You're going to get fucking humped. And then we end up putting, if it was a completed kick, what should have been 41 points. So we put up 38. And most of that was through the air. DK Metcalf having this huge game. Me making the mistake of sitting him in fantasy football. I ended up losing fantasy football by 10 points because I decided to sit DK Metcalf because I'm like, well, he hasn't been doing things against these good teams. And we're about to go against Dallas, who's got this amazing, pass defense. There's no, like, if DK hasn't been doing things against these other teams, then I definitely shouldn't start him against Dallas, right? The tendencies, I talk about tendencies all the time. So I decided to sit him in fantasy football, and what do you know? I lose by 10 points, and DK put up like fucking 40 points. Shame on me for doubting DK Metcalf and this team's ability to bounce back and continue to compete. And this is a truth about Pete Carroll that we've talked about routinely, which is Pete Carroll's teams. They always get back together and they get into this philosophy of always competing. You might lose the game, right? You might lose the game, but you will never see this team literally give up on the field and give up during the week. They're going to compete their asses off every single week, and they'll go up against a good Dallas team and lose, but make it look like, oh yeah, we might win this game. And to be honest, if it wasn't for the refs, we don't really know. I honestly believe this. I don't think we really know how close that game should have been, because the refs were kind of helping both teams and fucking over both teams. It could have been that the Cowboys scored 40 on us and we scored like 20 plus. Or it could have been that the Cowboys scored just barely 30 and we scored the 30 plus. I don't know, right? We'll never really know, because the Cowboys weren't hitting third down. They kept continuously converting on second down. But then there were also those flags. So would we have ever had an opportunity to turn one of those third downs that the flags were thrown on? Would we have ever actually turned those into punts? We will never know. We'll never know, right? But also we can go based off of the tape that they kept converting those second downs, so they were probably going to convert the third downs. We'll never know. But what we can know is that a truth of that game and a truth of the Pete Carroll regime is that our guys compete their asses off every week. And especially on defense, even if they're not performing well. And when you look at that 49ers game, our offense was in shambles. But when we talked about it, like, I said that we needed to start Drew Lock that week, even though Drew Lock was going to be the worst quarterback. And I said this because Gino wasn't going to be able to practice till Wednesday, which was going to be a walkthrough because it was a short week. And so he wasn't going to have a real practice because his arm was going to be all wrapped up. And so you weren't really going to know while game planning. This is Shane Waldron and company. They weren't going to know how to game plan for the 49ers because they didn't know if their quarterback was going to be able to complete certain throws down the field. He wasn't really going to be there to help practice. What they needed to do, in my mind, for the 49ers game, since you're scripting, you need to script the first couple drives with Drew Lock and prepare like it's Drew Lock. Get him out there. Start the game with Drew Lock for a couple drives, and then get Gino in there after things kind of settle in a little bit, and have this whole game plan surrounded with Drew Lock in the running game, and let your let the other 52 players of the team get ready for the game and not have it all surrounded around this precarious situation of, well, will Geno Smith be ready to go? I don't know. We're just going to wait. And you see teams all the time with terrible quarterbacks go in there and the rest of the team competes. And I just think it was a psychological mistake against the 49ers. So this week, going against the 49ers, if we can get into that always compete mentality, I'm not saying we're going to win, but it should be a more interesting game than Thanksgiving, right? When we look at the way that we played Dallas, and 49ers just absolutely destroyed the Eagles, which I knew was going to happen. People were surprised at that result. I'm like, well, yeah, the last time that the Eagles played the 49ers had 0 quarterbacks on their roster. I'm sorry, but that's going to make a big effect on how many points you score. If the other team doesn't have a quarterback, you're going to keep putting up points on them. It's like if a team goes 3-0 on you over and over again. If Geno Smith and company keep going 3 and out, the 49ers are going to keep putting points on you because of clock management. Eventually, a team is going to keep scoring on you. Any team. Even if you have the Legion of Boom, eventually a team is going to put points on you. It might be field goals, sure, but they're it might be. Remember the 6-6 game against the Carrolls in their home stadium? What kept it at 6-6 was that Bobby Wagner kept jumping the line and deflecting fucking field goals. Like, it should have been more. And it's because the defense played 90 plus snaps. Like, eventually a team is going to put points on you no matter how good your defense is. So this 49ers team with a good offense against our defense that isn't able to stop the run right now for complicated reasons, they're going to put up points on us if our offense can't fix the clock. And when you looked at that Cowboys game, the clock management was definitely on the Cowboys side. They had the clock way more than we did. And nobody was punting. There was, I think we were scoring faster than them, which was weird because they kept just driving down the field. But I think that they were taking more time off of the clock, and maybe we were in hurry up more often. And of course, the 4 and outs at the end of the game, giving the ball back to Dallas, us throwing the pick. Yeah, it is all those things accumulated to Dallas had the clock more. And ultimately, whoever possesses the ball longer, and turnovers included, they're going to win the game. And that's part of the always compete mentality is whoever controls the ball wins the game. And so I like these truths. And that's part of what Tell the Truth Monday is it's not to go in there and drag yourself down, right? Do you want me to do that? Here's some truths. Here's some truths. Seahawks are 6-6. There's no way they're going to make the playoffs. Pete Carroll sucks. He hasn't been able to hire a good coach since Dan Quinn, and that was a Mora guy. The best offensive line coach he ever hired was Solari, and he let that guy go. We got Brian Schottenheimer, and he let the quarterback bully him out of getting rid of the best offensive coordinator he ever went. Now he went to Dallas, and they're putting up 40 points. Like, do you want some negativity? Like, what do you fucking want from me? That's not good. That's anywhere. We'll get to that. But let's focus on some positive truths. That's what Tell the Truth Monday is about as far as the team is going. They're going to go in there and they're going to say, we sacked Dak Prescott, 4 times? And the last 3 games that the Cowboys played, nobody has sacked him. He's been sacked 0 times. The Eagles sacked him 5 times. And then there was 3 games where nobody sacked the Cowboys. And we were able to sack the fuck out of that man. We almost got him another time until he started to back out of Darrell Taylor. And part of the reason that might have been, other than, Darrell Taylor, but you got to gang sack him sometimes, is when you look at the ref, he started to signal, his hand was in the air, he started to signal that Dak Prescott was down and that the play was over. And so did that affect, hey, were people going to go in and try to finish sacking Dak, or did the pass rushers pull up and try to avoid him? And then once he escaped, they realized, oh, the play's still going, and then they started running after Dak, but by that point it was too late and he scrambled out and completed a first down. So was that supposed to be a sack because the ref signaled and then everyone pulled up, Dak escaped, and then the ref let the play continue forward? Or was that supposed to be a sack? There's a truth for you. It was a poorly called game. and since, because of today's NFL, normally back in the day, all of those players would be like, well, I'm going to finish the play, and I'm going to go up there and I'm going to drag the quarterback down, or I'm going to flip my hit. Darrell Taylor would have been told to like grab him and actually pull him down to the ground instead of just like, he would be throwing him down to the ground. Everyone else would be dogpiling the quarterback instead of being taught, oh, the play's over, I'm going to swerve out of the side. So in today's NFL, like, we don't know, would somebody have just clobbered him to the ground, or because somebody signaled, aka the ref signaled that the play was over, did the defensive linemen that were getting towards him pull up because, oh, there's a signal saying that the play's over, so I need to make sure that I don't hit this quarterback because we're about to get a 15-yard penalty and a first down because of it? Don't know. That would have been a 5th sack, if so. So, there's a truth out there for some people that is actually an untruth. People are saying that our pass rush isn't getting to the quarterbacks. We are getting to the quarterback. We are doing it really well, and we're doing it against teams that are able to protect their quarterbacks. And we're doing it to the level of elite teams, like the Eagles, like the 49ers, where we're sacking good teams 4 or 5 times a game. Now, we need to do it more consistent, sure. But especially once we got Williams, it really opened up the entire front. So I would like to see this front continue, the Jones, the Reed, the Williams, and the Mafe. But I think a truth is we're not stopping the inside zone run. I think we're being out-muscled. I think we don't have enough weight on the line. We're so busy trying to pass the rusher that when somebody tries to run at us, we're just being crushed. And as I've said in the past, we need a Joseph. I'm trying to remember his first name. He was played for the Vikings forever. He was a huge man, right? We need that Red Bryant. We need a Ndamukong Suh. We need a war daddy. We need a Campbell. We just need a big war daddy on the line. Not necessarily a nose tackle. He can play 3 tech. He can play 5 tech. But we need a war daddy. We need somebody to be a stone on the line. That means that when they're trying to run a trap play, or when they're trying to pull a guard, it's not moving. So then suddenly they can't do that type of thing to that gap set. And it completely cuts off a set of lanes. And sure, you can't necessarily pass rush with this guy, but you won't be opening throwing lanes there either. You won't be opening running gaps there. The quarterback won't be able to escape there, right? So it's a trade-off. You can either have a line where it's just a bunch of pass rushers, but your offensive line, the opposing offensive line, will be able to move you guys around. But you're really versatile. Or you can have a stone and then work around it. And I'm starting to think that maybe we need a stone. We need a war daddy. And it's kind of what I've been saying about our defensive backfield, where it seems like we're so versatile in our defensive backfield that teams are dictating where they want our guys to go. Whereas the old Legion of Boom, our stone was the enforcer. It was Cam Chancellor. And another stone was Richard on the other side. So we just had them there. And then it forced teams to have to play around them because they were dictating this side of the field, you can only do these things. We know that you are limited to throwing this play and this play or running this play and this play. And we'll deal with that. But because of the way that our players are designed to function, you are limited. And so when you look at our D-line, we have a bunch of really versatile players. And sure, they're good at pass rushing, but it's created an inverse problem. And I think this is the truth when we're going up against teams where the league is now starting to be like, well, we don't have as many good passing quarterbacks, but we have a bunch of really good running schemes. I think, especially with Kyle Shanahan and the Eagles and Tua and the Dolphins and the 49ers and what they're doing. There's so many teams now that are just running the hell out of the ball really well, and and it's not necessarily because they have good running backs, but they have really good schemes, and they know how to use the old school schemes, and it's because the league is constantly rotating between, we're going to be a passing league. Now we're going to be a running league. Now we're going to be, and it's because teams try to get too versatile, and the way to respond to that is to knuckle in. And then when teams try to deal with, get bigger and try to deal with all that muscle, teams spread out. So then you got to respond by spreading out. And so what's happened is that this Pete Carroll defense has spread so far out that we can't dictate to anybody. So yeah, we can spread around and we can respond to everything that everyone's doing, but all we're doing is responding. And if all you're doing is responding to what's in front of you, you can't dictate to an offense, and it's screwing us against every single type of offense we're going against. And it's not giving us opportunities to pick off the ball. Maybe we're getting opportunities to fumble, but we're not getting opportunities to shut the other team down. And they're just driving down the field on us every time. And I don't think it's a John Schneider thing. I think it's a Pete Carroll thing. And it's his ability to scout coaches. And this is a truth that I've talked about in the past. I don't trust his ability to identify coaching talent. And this isn't even talking about the nepotism on the roster, where once Nate Carroll took over the wide receivers, their quality of routes seemed to go down the toilet. I would very much like it if we could, especially considering Pete Carroll's age and where he is in his contract, I would like for Pete Carroll to take a step back and become, because right now he's the president of the Seahawks, right? He runs the Seahawks organization, and then John Schneider is the general manager. I think John Schneider's been there long enough. I would like to see him take over those duties from Pete Carroll. We talk about, well, who's going to take over head coaching duties for Pete Carroll when Pete Carroll's gone? But people aren't talking about the really big picture. He's not the head coach. he is the head coach, but he's also the president of the Seahawks. He runs fucking everything. And he chose a great GM, but he hasn't chosen the best coaches. And this isn't a ageist thing. This is a let's face the truth. Eventually Pete Carroll is going to get too old for the job. And he needs an understudy. He is the overstudy. He is the teacher. He is the guy who knows how to run the Seahawks. He is the one who has taught always compete. He knows how to teach people how to do this. And John Schneider has been there the entire time. And if we want to keep that type of vibe in the building, I would love for John Schneider to take over. Because ever since he took over scouting, which it seemed like once Jody Allen became owner and kind of took a little bit of the scouting duties and draft pick duties from Pete and gave it more to John Schneider, we started to have better drafts. And part of that also was getting Steve Hutchinson in, which I've talked about also. And I'm not saying fire Pete Carroll. No. I'm saying let's take some of those responsibilities. Let's continue doing that. We're going to, I'm trans, right? I love transitions. Let's transition away from Pete Carroll as his contract is gradually moving forward. Let's let him focus on competing, on winning a Super Bowl and coaching, right? And maybe bring in an assistant head coach that John Schneider scouts and likes, that he wants Pete Carroll to teach. An assistant head coach that's going to be Pete Carroll's understudy. And John Schneider is now the one who is taking over the organization, because Pete Carroll has been running the thing and John Schneider's been Pete's understudy, because Pete also ran USC. And that's where he first learned how to do it. I hope you see my logic with this, because John Schneider also was a big Green Bay guy. And for the longest time in John's contracts, he had it written that if an opportunity ever arose for him in Green Bay, that he could cancel his contract and go to Green Bay. Until his last contract, he's now a Seattle guy. And I think he would jump at an opportunity to take this Seattle job. And I think he's really good at his job. I think he's spectacular at his job. And I would love for him to get this opportunity. And I think it would be good for us to not rip a bandage off getting rid of Pete Carroll. Because it's not we're replacing our head coach. It's we're ripping the entire organization from the ground up, from the top down. So let's not do that. Let's instead identify good talent within the organization. And it starts with John Schneider. I think out of everyone in our organization, he is the most talented individual. And he's shown the most promise. Unless you have a better recommendation. We have talked about him being general manager of the year for over a decade now, many times. We've been like, oh, Pete Carroll with the Legion of Boom and finding Russell Wilson, and like, oh no, that was Russell Wilson and company. That was John Schneider. And in the last two drafts, that was John Schneider. And all these contracts over the years, that was John Schneider making a lot of this stuff work. And sure, Pete Carroll is coaching and maybe he helped build the Legion of Boom. But let's give some credit to John Schneider. And especially when it comes to the drafts that have built these teams twice. Well, despite these last 2 drafts, our defense plays like shit. Right? But we have all this talent. But clearly he's able to assemble talent. But he's not the one who's he's not the one who's scouting the coaches. That's a Pete Carroll thing. And so I would love to know what John Schneider would do. Because if he's able to identify excellent talent for players, can he identify talent for coaches? I want to know what he would do as president of the Seahawks. Because that's his thing, right? Is running contracts and running the organization. And he's been there through the Brett Favre and the Aaron Rodgers era. Knows Mike Holmgren, knows Pete Carroll. Like, this dude has been through some fucking Hall of Fame work. He's been there forever. I would love him to get that promotion and have it be a seamless transition instead of, well, we're just going to find some guy. We're just going to give some opportunity to some guy. Now, there might be some guy out there who's better than John Schneider. But would the transition be as seamless? And also, would him being better translate? Because sometimes it's just a straight up culture thing. Would we go from the always compete attitude, and then he starts, like how Mike Holmgren went to the Browns, but he just did not get along with the owner whatsoever, and so it was going to be a disaster from the start. And so he assembled a good team, but because the owners were trash, it was never going to work. And so John Schneider at least gets along really well with Jody Allen and knows the team, knows the culture of the city and everything. Let's ride with it. And again, I'm not saying that I don't like Pete Carroll. I've been a Pete Carroll truther this entire time. I don't often agree with him, but I understand his logic and I vibe with it. I just don't think he always hires the best coaches, and I don't think he's made a good decision on his choice of defensive style. That being said, I would just like to see growth within the organization. And sometimes the only way to grow is to shed skin. And we shed some skin when we got rid of Ken Norton Jr. and a bunch of the offensive line coaches and the quarterback coaches and all that other stuff. We brought in Aaron Curry for some reason to be our linebackers coach, which is, I guess, an opportunity for a young player to enter the NFL. But I'm not sure if we're removing the skin from the head of the snake. You feel what I'm getting at? You can keep removing skin from down below, but there's skin still at the top. And we're not growing up at the top. And it's kind of like with Bill Belichick, where eventually you start losing so many games in a season that you're beating records that shouldn't have been beaten from the 30s. I want to say they beat some record from the Chicago Cardinals for the amount of games lost under 10, where they kept the opponents under 10 points. So they've lost so many games where they kept the opponents under 10 points that hadn't been done since 1938 or something. It's just a heartbreaker. Where he's playing good defense, but his mentality on offense and his ability to scout talent for coaches is so bad now that and is so used up. He doesn't have any more connections for coaches, that his offense is completely dried. He like turned his defensive coordinator into his offensive coordinator. And he keeps using the same offensive and defensive coordinators that like go to be failed coaches and then they come back. And he doesn't have any other connections to other coaches in the NFL. And he's just dried up. It's like a well that's just gone dry on that side of the and it's not necessarily because he's a bad like football mind. It's that he doesn't have any other connections to other football minds to help him grow. And that's a problem in a sport that's constantly growing, and you need to have fresh perspectives, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And so if you're putting up less than 10 points and your defense is holding teams to under 10 points, it's a fucking heartbreaker, man. That's got to be driving him crazy. And granted, he's playing the hardest schedule in the NFL this year, and it's not particularly close. Give Bill Belichick some credit, right? He's holding teams under 10 points. I don't think the Seahawks have been doing that much this year, and Pete Carroll is definitely not doing that. But again, like, how would you probably help Bill Belichick is you got to get some new ideas in there. And Pete Carroll tried that with Shane Waldron and company. But Pete Carroll runs everything. And so does Bill Belichick, which means from the ground up, they're both kind of suffering from the same problem, which is the way that they see football, the way that the actual sport functions might be a problem. And it's not necessarily because of the way that the game is played, but the way that they see the people that talk about the sport is the problem. For instance, when I hear somebody talk about the Vic Fangio defense, I understand the idea to spread everything out. And I used to vibe with it because, well, yeah, if you put a guy over there, you get the speed and versatility to cover the slot. And then you can have the safety also do this. And then you can also have him drop and cover the running back. And you just have a super versatile player, right? Until I realized down the road that you get weight problems. You get weight problems. But what it's really good for is footwork. So it's about distance. But if you don't line this guy up in the right distance, then it defeats the purpose of him being a hybrid player. So what I don't like about the Vic Fangio system is that, yeah, they have a hybrid player, but they don't seem to put him, the hybrid player, in a good position of footwork, and then they don't make up for it on the defensive line with the weight problem. So then you go bare, which makes up for it on the weight problem, and then you have a hybrid player in the background. But then I don't like that because you end up having you have a math problem in the defensive backfield. So then the hybrid player ends up having to do too much. So you end up having to just play nickel, like big nickel, where you just kind of replace the will with the safety, and then you're kind of like, oh, I have a light will linebacker. In which case, you should just have a will linebacker that can play safety. And so it just goes down like this tree of logic. And so you got to find somebody who can think outside your tree of logic to compete against your challenges. And if you find somebody who can be like, oh, I do the Vic Fangio, and you end up just kind of running it along the same form of logic as you, because this is what coaches want, right? Is they want to find a coach who can run what you want to do the same exact way that you want to do it. I want to hire a coach. I have this thing in my brain. Can you do what's in my brain? Yes or no? And then they hire the coach that can do it. And then if you hire a coach that can't do what you want, you fire them. But if you hire a really good coach, that coach will say, nah. I see what you're doing. You want to do this. And then the coach goes, holy shit, you're right. I do want to do this. You want to hire that guy. You want to hire the guy that understands what you want, and he wants to make that better. Because he sees the game from a different perspective, right? He sees the game backwards from you. And he's like, no, because if you do this, I'm just going to beat you that way. Right? You want to hire your foil, if that makes any sense. Sure, if you hire a guy that knows exactly what you want to do, yeah, he can run it. But if you hire a guy who knows how to beat what you can do, he can not only run what you can do because he understands it, but he knows how then the opponent that is going to compete against you is going to beat your ass. So he can make an adjustment to it. And I don't think Pete Carroll is hiring those guys. Are you vibing with what I'm saying? This is what made Dan Quinn so good. Pete Carroll was a defensive backs guy, and Dan Quinn's a defensive lines guy. And they were exact opposites of each other in every way. And when our powers combined, right? You mix with Ken Jordan in the middle, Ken Newton Jr. in the middle with the linebackers. You made the Legion of Boom. You just had these three amazing fucking coaches together, and all three of them do not think the same. All three of them do not see the same game at all, but they know how all three function, so they can all foil each other. And so I can only imagine what those conversations were like, no, you want to fucking do this? No, we should do this, because they're just going to do this, which means that we should do. And then Pete's like, oh, you're right, because if I do this, then he just, and then Ken's like, no, because if Dan does that, then he's just going to go over there. And Pete's like, well, then we should just have Earl drop there and then have Richard wrote. And then Dan's like, oh my God, you're so right. Like, those conversations must have been insane. Game planning every single week. That must have been so much fun, because it wasn't just, okay, Pete, I'll do that. I how many times do you think Chris Richard was like, okay, Pete, I'll do that? Maybe he challenged some ideas, but he was a DB guy who probably was just asked, because he'd been there since USC, I'm just going to do exactly what Pete Carroll told me to do. Because that's what he had been doing since USC. I'm just going to do exactly what Pete Carroll told me to do. I'm just going to run the plays. And I wasn't there, right? I'm hyperbolizing. Chris Richard's probably a great coach. Carl Scott's probably doing a similar thing where he's like, yeah, I run this system. This is what I run. The coaches who bring me in specifically to run this system. This is why Carl Scott was brought in, was with Sean Desai, because Clint Hurt was like, yeah, I'm going to run this defense. I want Sean Desai and I want Carl Scott because they know the Vic Fangio system that I'm going to want to be running. And I've worked with these guys before, or at least Sean Desai before. So, they know this. I want to do this, teach this. That's my assumption for Carl Scott. So it's like Shane Waldron. Like, is Shane Waldron, does he know the Sean McVay system? As in, Sean McVay came in and said, here's my system. Can you teach it? Okay, teach it. Let's go. Then got hired by Pete Carroll. He's like, well, this is what I was taught to do. Right? Or was he brought into, okay, this is my system. And then he was having arguments with Sean McVay the entire time about how the system works. And they were theory crafting the entire time. I don't think that's what was happening with Sean McVay. And you got to get to that point, right, where you know the system and you're breathing it. But I from what we've seen, I don't think Sean McVay's that guy. I don't think, like, maybe Gus Bradley had a little bit of that in him. I don't think so. I think Mike Solari had that in him as an offensive coach. He was just a good offensive line coach. Tom Cable, at the very least, for all the shit I gave Tom Cable, he wasn't a good coach, but he was a good offensive mind when it came to running the ball. So I'll give him that. I didn't always like his... I always thought it was a little too simple, but to be fair, his guys couldn't do much because he was a bad offensive line coach. So he was probably really limited in the type of stuff he could call. But, he had a lot of good running foils. So he often knew, like, oh, yeah, they're doing this. I'm going to fucking do this. So it was often just, like, some really cool running plays. And I just don't think Pete Carroll, historically, has hired guys that maybe challenge him. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for. He doesn't hire guys that challenge his logic. And maybe John Schneider would hire guys that would challenge Pete Carroll's logic. If you really think about it, what type of coaches does Pete Carroll bring in? He brings in promotions of guys that he's like coached up, often from USC, or he had those opportunities from the Jim Mora guys that worked out well until that tank drained really quickly. And yeah, he's got like the Shane Waldron, Andy Dickerson tree that started up. But for the most part, his guys are like the young kids that coached up underneath him that were probably like told, hey, I want you to do this thing. Do it exactly the way I told you. And probably were never like coached any other system and brought in to challenge Pete Carroll. And he probably just, I'm going to try this Vic Fangio system. Hey, Clint, do you think you could run the Vic Fangio system? Yeah, Pete, I bet I could run the Vic Fangio system. And then they rolled with it. And it's not working out. And I'm not sure if this is a truth. I know this is Tell the Truth Monday. It's something I feel in my gut. Right? I don't feel like Pete Carroll's being challenged. And if he wants to always compete, I have a challenge for Pete Carroll. He's going to retire eventually. My challenge for you is to bring in competition for yourself. Bring in competition for yourself. I'm not saying a guy that's going to replace you, but bring in some coaches that are going to challenge you every second of the season. Right? I'm not saying you're going to get into some shouting matches, but they're going to make you better because they're going to have some feelings about the way that the football is ran and defended. And they're going to maybe not challenge the way that you want to run the organization, but they're going to challenge the way you think about the on-field performance. That's what I want. I want you to compete with yourself, Pete. And you do that by bringing in other iron to sharpen you. Because I don't think he's sharp right now. And I think it's the other coaches. And sure, this isn't to say that the other coaches underneath him didn't deserve those opportunities. But Clint Hurt hadn't really ran a good defensive line unit ever. He had like Al Woods and Puna Fording Company stopping the run, but that was the Ken Norton Jr. defense, and linebackers and company stopped the run with safeties crashing down. Defensive linemen set up the blocks, sure, but as soon as he took over, our run defense went to shit, and it is still shit. So I don't think Clint Hurt is necessarily the guy. And that's not necessarily his fault. You get an opportunity, you take it, and then you learn from the opportunity and you keep going. But I think it's a Pete Carroll thing. So to reiterate, I would like to see John Schneider get promoted. I would like to see Pete Carroll gradually begin his transition into retirement. This is not to say that he is a bad coach. I would like to see him challenge himself by bringing in some good coaches with some fucking feelings about how this game should be played, and to challenge him throughout the year about the philosophy of the offense and the defense. And I would like these two schemes that we're running to drastically shift. Not necessarily change, but shift, because he's being challenged. Okay, let's talk about the players. DK Metcalf, here's some truths. I don't think he's being used correctly. He had a hell of a game. Better hands. Like, he always has some like dead hands drops. He doesn't catch with his fingertips. He still hasn't caught with his fingertips. I've talked about in the past Jerry Rice. His thing is he catches with his fingertips like this. Let's see. My ball doesn't have, they have the white line on it, but it's to help you see, but you catch with your fingertips instead of your palms, because if you catch with your palms, you have less grip and just slides out. You catch with your fingertips because you get more control and you have more points to catch on. Whereas with this, look at how you have less traction, and so you have to try to catch it wide to get it, but it still will just slip out. I hope that makes sense to you, right? Because you don't have the ability to claw the ball. All your strength is in your fingertips. It is not in your palms. You don't have any strength in your palms. You have to alligator it if you want to have any strength in your palms, because your strength then goes to your forearms. You want to use your fingertips to catch. And with Jerry Rice, he would talk about his dad would throw bricks at him. Not as like a form of torture or anything like that, but his dad was a mason, right? He would build walls. And so he would be like, okay, catch this brick, lay the brick. And so in order to catch it properly, he would focus on the corner of the brick, right? Because you don't want this thing to freaking rip your hands up, right? So you'd focus on the corner of the brick and you'd catch it with your fingertips. If you catch it with your palms, you'll drop it, the brick will shatter, that shit's expensive. But the flat palm technique, you don't have as much friction and you don't have as much tactile grip. You need to have here, because you get more points of grip on the ball. Right? It's just better grip. And I know my ball's flat, but it's the same type of thing. If you use your palms, the ball will slip out almost every single time. So he palm catches all the time and then tries to secure it with his palms by bringing his fingers then around the ball. And so I would like to see him get better at fingertip catching. When you fingertip catch, then somebody will try to swat and you'll have your fingers available. When you have your palms, it's easier for somebody to punch the ball out. Another thing he does is he'll try to do a bucket catch. And, he'll let it fall into his palms, or he'll let it fall into his chest, and he'll try to catch it in. And sometimes, I talk about all the time, hands to hands, where if a defender gets their hands into the hand, then you basically just catch somebody's hands, And so if you're catching with palms, that's going to happen. If you're catching with fingertips, you can typically get up over their hand and sometimes catch around the hand and get up and over. Easier said than done, right? But if you're doing a bucket catch, then somebody can always just punch in and pop it. So you want to be an engaged catcher. You want to engage up into the ball. So he's gotten better as a palm catcher. He's catching with his palms instead of always doing a bucket catch, which was what he was doing the first couple years of his career. So he's gotten better at catching with his palms. But what I want to see as he moves on with his career is I want to see him get better at catching with his fingers, specifically his fingertips. Not like this, right? If he does this, he's going to snap a finger. You want to catch with your fingertips. So, and we saw that in the Cowboys game where he had a couple bucket catches, and he had a couple hand catches, and sometimes when he just does a palm catch, it just drops. And even I think it was Tyler Lockett had like a palm catch instead of a fingertip catch, and he starts pounding on the ground. Tyler Lockett Lockett's had just a lot of weird plays this year that are really out of character. And I think it's either lack of coaching, like the little minute, these are small details, right? These are things that they teach you in high school, but they're supposed to, right? but you need to maintain it forever. You need to practice it forever, right? These are things that fucking Larry Fitzgerald had to practice forever until he retired because COVID fucked him up. R.I.P. Larry Fitzgerald. He's still alive, but that happened to him, and I felt so bad. Everyone needs to focus on fingertip catching. Quarterbacks need to. The long snappers need to. The punters and kickers need to, right? It's so crucial to have traction. And so if you're not focusing on the jugs machine and you're subconsciously starting to get into palm catching, that is the result you are going to get. And so I'm hoping that Tyler Lockett learned from that experience, went onto the jugs machine, and he's a smart dude, right? He's a smart dude. I'm hoping that all the times he got hit in the head, he never got a serious concussion to make him not as smart as he is. But I'm just saying. But he knows how to catch the ball using his fingertips, and so we shouldn't see that. But all year long, he's kind of been falling apart gradually on little subtle details. As far as route running, he's not as sharp. He's not quite getting to where he used to be. He's always been getting a little slower since his injury. I'm going to say something, and I get hated for this every time I say it. So if I get a dislike, I understand. I absolutely understand that someone's going to dislike this. You have a choice as a GM when it comes to players. You can either keep them until they're a worn out shoe, and then they were a part of your team forever. And then you give them a handshake, you include them into the Ring of Honor, and you paid them their money, and then you kick them out the door. Keep them around. Or you cut their contract early once they start performing poorly. Or at the peak of their performance, right around just before their contract is about to collapse because their performance is about to dip, you trade them. You try to get as much capital back as you can so that you can hopefully turn them into another all-pro player, another Pro Bowl player. Because if you trade them at just the right time, they're at the peak, but also they got like a year or two left before they fall off the face of the planet. You might be able to get like a third-round pick or maybe even a second-round pick because they're so good, right? And so it's a matter of like respect for the player, but also good business decisions. And if you just cut the player midway through their contract because they're aging. That's kind of disrespectful, right? We can both, I think everyone can agree that's kind of disrespectful. It's also, to be honest, it's a waste of resources. So in my mind, there's two options. You can either run the player's contract all the way out, give them the Ring of Honor, which you're probably going to give them anyways, shake their hand and walk them out the door. Or, kind of the argument I was making, was you trade them. And here's why I normally am against it. But in the Tyler Lockett argument, I was for it. We had just entered the conversation about trading Russell Wilson. And then we did it. We traded him to the Denver Broncos and we got a ton of capital. So I thought to myself, oh, what a wonderful world. We got rid of this quarterback who's going to be worth a ton of cap space. We don't have a quarterback at the time, right? And even now it's under debate as far as cap space and all that other stuff. But we got this wide receiver, Tyler Lockett, who's at the top of his game, about to deteriorate. Is it fair for a player who's worth all this money and, is worth all these stats to separate him from his buddy and his favorite quarterback and kind of remove his livelihood, his ability to get all these bulk stats and stuff? No, it could be bad for his legacy. So there isn't necessarily anything really wrong with the idea of getting rid of a player and sending him somewhere better. So I don't need to feel bad about this idea of shopping a player in certain situations. It's not like we're running high and then we're going to get rid of him for an extra pick. We already got rid of our quarterback. We could try to send him to Denver. So, because they had Judy and they had fucking Sutton, and they're having problems with Russell Wilson at the beginning of the season. And at the time, I think Sutton and Judy were injured. So why not see if the Denver Broncos would be interested in Tyler Lockett as well, Russell Wilson's favorite receiver, see if they can fix Russell Wilson at the time. And at the time, Lockett's contract was reasonable for trading. And it's too late now, right? I'm just saying. And not necessarily trade him to Denver, but the Denver might have said, no, fuck you. You traded a lemon. We're not taking Lockett too, right? Yeah, opportunities, right? It's a hypothetical. And so then a couple years down the road, we get JSN, and now we got DK Metcalf, who we paid, and Tyler Lockett. It looks like it's probably his last or second last year. And people are appalled at the idea that I wanted to trade him in 2021. 2022. But if we had traded him, we probably could have gotten another wide receiver this year. Maybe even two if we gotten a couple draft picks for him. And so, would that have been so bad? We could have cleared up some cap space for the following year, which we're going to need to pay Damian Lewis and company, and we would have gotten some new contracts under control for the following years for not just JSN, who's already replaced Lockett, but for potentially a third target. Or we could have drafted a right guard. Well, we did. We drafted Bradford. But, we could have, it could have been something, right? We drafted JSN. We replaced Lockett. Yippee. Now we're going to draft a war daddy at defensive tackle. It's about resource redistribution. And then once Tyler Lockett finishes his 2 years on the contract, retires, becomes a real estate agent, we make him a Ring of Honor in Seattle. And who knows, maybe he just wanted to stay in Seattle, and we did try to trade him. And he's like, nah, I want to stay in Seattle with Geno Smith. Again, these are hypotheticals. But the truth is, there were opportunities to set up this team to be a rebuild team. Like a real, actual rebuild team. Where we stripped everything down. And it was just DK Metcalf. We didn't pay Will Dissly. we got rid of Tyler Lockett. And yeah, we have Fant and Parkinson and this offensive line, but just a whole bunch of youth everywhere. But we kept Tyler Lockett and we kept Will Dissly, and we're still trying to compete. And was that the best decision? You tell me. Was keeping these guys around instead of just ripping everything out? Was that the best decision in the long run? I mean, you do have to keep some talent around. And when you look at Will Dissly, it was a good decision to keep him around, right? He's blocking well, and that first year, Shane Waldron was using him, and we haven't been using him this year. So was it a good decision? I don't know. It's hard to tell, right? There's no consistency. Why even sign a tight end if you're not going to be using him 2 years in a row? But that goes to coaching, right? If your general manager is making good decisions on the roster and setting your team up for success, and you're not using the tools on your roster, then what's the point? Oh well. I don't have any other truth that I wanted to get to today. Rivalry week. Yeah. So that's Tell the Truth Monday. The truth is, we're probably going to get our asses kicked by the 49ers this week. We could surprise everyone, like we started to surprise the Cowboys. But as I described against the 49ers last time, they know what this is about. The Seahawks are going to come in. They're going to try to give the best game. This 49ers team is old. They might not be physically the oldest team in the NFL, but they have been together for a long time. Most of this team has been together since Jimmy Garoppolo and them lost to the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. They have been together a long time. You will not surprise this team. You're not going to show up and perform a trap game against the 49ers in Santa Clara as their rivals. If you were maybe the Titans or somebody, right? Like some weird team that they won't take seriously at all, maybe, but you'd make so many mistakes that they're still going to fuck you over. This 49ers team is going to try to repeat the script of Thursday. So it's up to the Seahawks to compete. And specifically, as we saw against that 49ers game, it's up in the Dallas game, it's up to the Seahawks coaches to show the fuck up. Clint Hurt needs to actually stop the run. We didn't stop it against Pollard. We didn't stop it against Juszczyk. Sorry, not Juszczyk. Watch Juszczyk run for 100 yards on us. We didn't stop it against CMC. We haven't stopped it against fucking any team that actually tries to run on us this year. And then Shane Waldron, do not throw an out route. There's a truth. Every time we have attempted to throw an out route to a team this year, it has not gone well. And then last week, I'm like, do not throw to Bland. Do not throw an out route against Bland. And he throws an out route against Bland, the guy who keeps picking off out routes, with Geno Smith, the guy who keeps throwing picks against out routes. And if you just watch tape, if you just look at like this basic logic, the guy who throws out routes against the guy who picks off out routes, put 2 and 2 together, what you're going to get? You're going to get a pick. And Shane Waldron throws it anyways. Shane Waldron, I would like to see you actually put some brain cells together this week against the 49ers. There's a truth. Anyways, thank you so much for listening to First Kick Seahawks this week. I really appreciated it. You know what? I really am looking forward to a good game too. Ma 415. And you guys are probably going to kick our butts, but I just want a good competitive game. I don't really care if we lose. I mean, I do, right? I get foaming at the mouth. But if it's a good mauling game where both teams are bleeding out their faces, that's awesome, right? That's what I care about. Is like that Dallas game. We lost, but it was awesome, right? It was that 6-6 Cardinals game. It was a tie, and people loathed that game. That's my favorite Seahawks game, was that 6-6 tie game, because it took blocked field goals and all sorts of shenanigans and tough defensive football. It took 90 defensive plays just to get a tie. I loved that game. So if this 49ers game turns into a 3-3 tie, I'm all fucking for it. If we lose 6-3, I'm all fucking for it. Let's fucking go. Anyways, thanks again for watching First Kick Seahawks. Please like and subscribe. It really help out the channel. I'm going to try to get that 49ers interview scheduled for Wednesday. I need to contact her right after this. And then I will see you guys later. Go Hawks and have a good night.